The assignment had sounded simple enough when Chief Garak Blackthorn spoke it, his massive hand clapping onto Nathan Yorke's shoulder with enough force to make a lesser man stumble. Guard his sister through the season's diplomatic balls. Keep her safe while the humans and orcs negotiated this fragile new peace, and collect a purse generous enough to see Nathan through the next year without work. Nathan had agreed with a nod, the same silent efficiency that had kept him alive through 6 campaigns along the borderlands. And now here, he stood in the entry hall of the Riverside Manor, watching servants drape banners in green and gold while musicians tuned their instruments in the ballroom beyond. "You must be my keeper for the evening." The voice came from behind him, low and edged with resignation. Nathan turned to find a young orc woman descending the staircase, and his first thought was that she looked nothing like her brother. Where Garak stood tall as a pine and broad as a bear, this woman moved with a dancer's grace, her frame slight beneath the deep blue gown that swept the steps behind her. Her green skin caught the lamplight like polished jade, and her dark hair had been woven into an elaborate braid that fell over one shoulder. Small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, barely visible unless she spoke, and her amber eyes held a weariness that Nathan recognized from his own reflection on bad mornings. "I am," Nathan said, offering a respectful bow. "Nathan Yorke, miss. Henna Blackthorn." She reached the bottom step and studied him with the same careful attention he had been giving her. "Former soldier," my brother said. "Infantry, scout division, miss." Something shifted in her expression, a fraction of the weariness lifting. "Then at least you will be quiet." The last guard they hired for these events talked incessantly about his heroic exploits. I nearly threw myself from a balcony just for the silence. Nathan felt the corner of his mouth twitch, the closest he came to a smile these days. "I will endeavor to bore you less dramatically, miss." "Just Henna, please. I hear Miss and my lady and Chief Blackthorn's sister so often that I sometimes forget my own name." She adjusted the drape of her gown, fingers restless against the silk. "Shall we join the festivities before my brother sends someone to fetch us? He grows anxious when I am late to these performances." Nathan fell into step beside her as they moved toward the ballroom, his trained gaze already cataloging exits, sightlines, potential threats. The first ball of the season drew representatives from both sides of the treaty negotiations. Human nobles from the river valleys, orc clan leaders from the mountain territories, merchants and advisors and hangers-on all eager to profit from peace. Tension hung thick as smoke, despite the cheerful music and bright decorations. The ballroom opened before them in a wash of candlelight and conversation. Human couples swirled across the floor in formal dances, while orc warriors stood in tight clusters, looking distinctly uncomfortable in their borrowed finery. A few mixed groups attempted polite discussion near the refreshment tables, their body language screaming discomfort despite their diplomatic smiles. "There," Henna murmured, gesturing subtly toward a raised platform where Garak stood in conversation with a gray-haired human in expensive robes. "Duke Rothwell, the primary human negotiator. They have been meeting for months, hammering out trade routes and border access. This entire season of balls exists to show everyone that humans and orcs can occupy the same space without bloodshed." "Can they?" Nathan asked quietly. "We are about to find out." Henna lifted her chin and stepped fully into the ballroom, and Nathan felt rather than saw the shift in attention. Conversations faltered. Eyes tracked their progress. Henna's expression smoothed into something pleasant and distant, the practiced mask of someone who had performed this role many times. Nathan kept his own face neutral, and his steps measured, staying close enough to intervene if needed but far enough to avoid crowding her. An orc warrior approached first, offering Henna a respectful greeting in their own language. She responded with visible warmth, her shoulders dropping from their rigid line, and they spoke for several minutes while Nathan catalogued the room's inhabitants. Most seemed genuinely interested in peace, or at least in the profit peace might bring. A few clusters of younger humans muttered among themselves with expressions Nathan did not like, but they kept their distance. The evening progressed in waves of stilted conversation and careful dancing. Henna moved from group to group with practiced ease, drawing Nathan along in her wake. She translated amusing anecdotes from orcish gatherings for human listeners, explained human customs to bemused orc clan representatives, and generally served as a living bridge between the two cultures. Nathan watched her work and understood why Garak had insisted on protection. She was not merely the chief's sister. She was a symbol, and symbols drew both devotion and resentment. "You are staring," Henna said during a brief lull, accepting a cup of wine from a passing servant. "I am watching the room," Nathan corrected. "You are watching me." "You are my assignment, Miss Henna," he amended at her look. She took a sip of wine, studying him over the rim. "What do you see when you watch me?" Nathan considered the question, aware it was more than idle curiosity. "Someone doing three people's work and making it look effortless." Her expression softened, something genuine breaking through the diplomatic mask. "That is possibly the kindest thing anyone has said to me in months. Most people see only my brother's ambitions or their own political opportunities." "Most people are fools. And you are not." "I am a different sort of fool, Henna. The sort who gets hired to stand in corners and look intimidating." This time she actually laughed, quiet but real, and Nathan felt an odd warmth in his chest. The feeling made him uncomfortable, so he turned his attention back to the room, noting the approach of three young men in expensive coats. Their faces held the particular combination of drink and confidence that usually preceded trouble. "Miss Blackthorn," the lead man said, his tone too loud and too familiar. "My companions and I were just debating whether orc women actually know how to dance, or if you simply stand around looking savage at these events." Henna's expression went carefully blank. "I know several dances, though I suspect our definitions of the word differ." "Why don't you demonstrate?" The man gestured toward the floor with exaggerated courtesy. "Unless you're guard objects, does he keep you on a leash?" Nathan moved before he thought about it, positioning himself between Henna and the three men. He did not speak, did not need to. 6 years of violence had left their mark in his eyes and in the way he held himself, and these soft nobles recognized a predator when one looked at them directly. The lead man stepped back, attempting to salvage his bravado. "We meant no offense." "Then you should leave," Nathan said quietly, "before offense finds you anyway." They left, muttering among themselves but moving quickly. Nathan turned back to find Henna watching him with an unreadable expression. "That was not necessary," she said. "It was. I have dealt with worse than drunken nobles making poor jokes. You should not have to." Nathan realized his jaw was clenched and forced himself to relax. "Apologies if I overstepped." Henna shook her head slowly. No, I think you stepped exactly where you needed to." She set down her wine cup and smoothed her gown. "Would you actually dance with me, Nathan Yorke, since we have apparently established my need for demonstration?" "I am a terrible dancer." "I do not believe that for a moment. Scouts move well or die young." She had him there. Nathan offered his hand and Henna took it, her palm warm against his. They moved onto the floor as a new song began, something slow and formal that Nathan vaguely remembered from mandatory officers training years ago. He placed his hand at the proper position on her back and tried to remember the steps. "You are actually adequate at this," Henna observed as they turned through the pattern. "I had a very strict instructor who hit us with a cane when we missed steps. Charming. No wonder you became a scout instead of a courtier." They danced in silence for a few measures, and Nathan became acutely aware of how close they stood, how her hand fit naturally in his, how the top of her head came exactly to his shoulder. Other couples gave them a wide berth on the floor. Whether from respect or suspicion, Nathan could not tell and did not particularly care. "Why did you leave the army?" Henna asked quietly. "The war ended. They did not need scouts to watch for orc war parties anymore. Do you resent that?" "The peace." Nathan met her eyes, seeing genuine concern there. "No, I saw enough killing for one lifetime. If your brother and Duke Rothwell can make peace hold, I will guard you through 100 balls and count myself lucky." Something in her expression shifted, softened, and Nathan realized with uncomfortable clarity that he had just said something more honest than he had intended. The music saved him from having to elaborate, building to its conclusion. They completed the dance and stepped apart, and Nathan immediately resumed his professional distance, though his palm still tingled where her hand had rested. The remainder of the evening passed without incident. Nathan escorted Henna back to her quarters in the guest wing as midnight approached, checking the corridors before allowing her to proceed. She paused at her door, turning to face him with that same thoughtful expression she had worn on the dance floor. "Thank you, Nathan, for tonight. I am being paid to be here." "Yes, but you could be paid and still be dreadful. You are not." She reached out as if to touch his arm, then seemed to think better of it, her hand falling back to her side. "The next ball is in a fortnight at the Oakmont estate. I suppose I will see you there." "I will be there." "Good." She slipped into her room and Nathan heard the lock click behind her. He stood in the empty corridor for a long moment, aware that something had shifted tonight, that the simple assignment had developed complications he had not anticipated. He walked back through the darkened manor, his footsteps echoing on marble floors. Through the windows, he could see the last carriages departing, carrying the evening's guests back to their homes and inns. The treaty talks would continue tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that, building slowly towards some hoped-for agreement. And Nathan would guard Henna through ball after ball, keeping her safe while the future of two peoples hung in careful balance. It should have been simple. It was anything but. The Oakmont estate sat on a rise overlooking the river valley, all white stone and formal gardens, the kind of place that made Nathan instinctively catalog tactical weaknesses. He arrived an hour before the ball was scheduled to begin, claiming he needed to familiarize himself with the grounds. In truth, he wanted time to settle the odd nervousness that had plagued him since accepting this second assignment. Henna arrived in a carriage with her brother, both of them dressed for the evening's political theater. Garak wore formal armor that had been polished to a high gleam, while Henna had chosen a gown in deep emerald that made her skin seem to glow. She saw Nathan waiting by the entrance and offered a small smile that did peculiar things to his pulse. "Our stalwart guardian returns," Garak rumbled, his massive hand once again finding Nathan's shoulder. "My sister tells me you handled some drunk nobles at the last gathering." "They were not worth mentioning." "That is what she said too, which makes me think they were worth mentioning and you both decided to spare me the aggravation." Garak's expression turned serious. "I trust you, Nathan Yorke. Henna matters more than any treaty, more than any alliance. You keep her safe, and you will never want for work or coin in this territory." Nathan met the chief's eyes and nodded once. Garak seemed satisfied, clapping his shoulder again before striding into the estate to join the early arrivals. Henna lingered, adjusting her gloves with unnecessary attention. "He means it, you know," she said quietly. About you mattering. My brother is many things, but he does not give his trust lightly. I will not betray it, I know." She looked up at him, and Nathan saw something in her expression that made his chest tighten. "Shall we face the crowds?" The ballroom at Oakmont made Riverside Manor look modest by comparison. Chandeliers dripped crystal light onto floors so polished they reflected like mirrors. Musicians occupied a full gallery, and the refreshment tables groaned under elaborate displays of food and wine. The guest list had apparently doubled since the first ball, with curious onlookers now mixing among the serious negotiators. Nathan positioned himself where he could watch both Henna and the room's entrances, falling into the comfortable patterns of threat assessment and readiness. Henna moved through the expected rituals, greeting nobles and clan leaders, translating and facilitating with the same graceful competence he had observed before. But tonight, he noticed other things too. The way she laughed at an old orc warrior's joke, the patience she showed explaining human customs to a young clan representative, the moment of exhaustion she allowed herself when she thought no one was watching. "You really are always watching her," a voice said from Nathan's left. He turned to find a woman in servant's clothing, probably mid-40s, holding a tray of wine cups. Her eyes held sharp intelligence. "That is my job." Just the job." She offered him a cup, which he declined. "Been working these events for 10 years now. Seen a lot of guards and a lot of looks. That one is not just professional interest, young man." Nathan felt his jaw tighten. "I do not know what you mean." "Course you don't." She smiled, not unkindly. "Word of advice, though. That girl has spent her whole life being useful to everyone else. Someone looking at her like she matters for herself, not for what she represents. That is rare enough to be dangerous." Before Nathan could respond, the woman moved away, circulating through the crowd with her tray. Nathan forced himself to focus on the room, on the job, on anything other than the uncomfortable accuracy of the servant's observation. He was here to guard Henna, nothing more. The fact that he found himself cataloging the way candlelight caught in her hair, or the precise tone of her laugh, was irrelevant and unprofessional. The evening progressed smoothly until the dancing began. Nathan watched Henna accept several partners, moving through formal patterns with humans and orcs alike, her diplomatic mask firmly in place. Then a young human noble approached, someone Nathan vaguely recognized from the first ball. The man said something that made Henna's smile falter, and Nathan moved closer without thinking about it. "I only mean that it must be difficult," the noble was saying as Nathan came within earshot, "being neither one thing nor another. Too civilized for orc society, too savage for ours. An eternal outsider." "I contain multitudes," Henna said lightly, but Nathan heard the strain beneath her tone. "Now, if you will excuse me, of course. Though I wonder if your guard there contains similar complexities, or if he is simply a blunt instrument your brother points at problems." Nathan stepped into the conversation's edge, his presence alone enough to make the noble falter. "Excuse me," he said quietly, "but the lady looks tired. Perhaps you should find another dance partner." The noble started to object, caught Nathan's expression, and apparently thought better of it. He offered a shallow bow and retreated. Henna watched him go, then turned to Nathan with eyes that held too much emotion for the public ballroom. "Walk with me," she asked. "Please." Nathan followed her through a side door onto a terrace that overlooked the gardens. Lanterns hung among the trees, creating pools of warm light in the darkness. Henna moved to the stone railing and gripped it, her knuckles standing out against her green skin. "I should be used to it by now," she said after a long silence. "The comments, the implications that I am some sort of curiosity, an orc playing at civilization. Nathan took up position beside her, close enough to speak quietly. "You are not playing at anything. Am I not?" She laughed, sharp and bitter. "I learned human customs because my brother needed a bridge to their culture. I dress in their gowns, speak their language, dance their dances. But I am still just the orc girl who does not quite fit anywhere." "I have never seen you not fit," Nathan said carefully. "I have seen you make everyone else fit around you. That is different." She turned to look at him, and in the lantern light her eyes gleamed suspiciously bright. "You say the strangest things, Nathan Yorke. I say what I see. And what do you see?" The question hung between them, weighted with more meaning than Nathan wanted to examine. He could deflect, could retreat into professional distance and safe silence. Instead, he found himself speaking the truth. Someone remarkable. Someone who carries more weight than anyone should have to carry and does it with grace. Someone who deserves better than drunk nobles and political games. He paused, aware he was saying too much and unable to stop. Someone I think about too often for someone who is just doing his job. Henna's breath caught, audible in the quiet garden. "Nathan, that was inappropriate," he said quickly. "Forgive me, I should not have—" "Stop." She reached out and caught his hand, her fingers warm and certain around his. "Please stop apologizing for being kind to me." They stood like that, hands clasped on a terrace while a ball continued without them, and Nathan felt the careful walls he had built around this assignment beginning to crumble. This was dangerous. She was the chief's sister, a symbol of the peace, someone far above his station and circumstance. He was a hired guard with nothing to his name but old scars and older regrets, but her hand fit perfectly in his, and when she looked at him like that, nothing else seemed to matter. "We should go back inside," Nathan finally said, though he made no move to pull away. "Yes," Henna agreed, also not moving. Then quieter. "Will you dance with me again? Before we return to the performance?" Nathan nodded, unable to trust his voice. They moved back into the ballroom, and when he took her in his arms for the dance, he let himself acknowledge what he had been denying. This was no longer just an assignment. Somewhere between the first ball and this moment, between professional duty and personal attention, he had started to care about Henna Blackthorn in ways that had nothing to do with being paid to guard her. And from the way she looked at him, from the way her hand tightened in his as they turned through the dance, she knew it too. The remaining balls of the season blurred together in Nathan's memory, each one a variation on the same themes: political maneuvering, careful conversations, and the growing connection between him and Henna that neither of them quite acknowledged aloud. He guarded her through gatherings at riverside estates and mountain lodges, through formal dinners and garden parties, and with each event he found it harder to maintain professional distance. Small moments accumulated like gold coins in a purse. Henna seeking him out in crowded rooms, her relief visible when she found him. The way she laughed at his dry observations about the guests, her amusement making him want to find more things to make her laugh. The night she fell asleep on a carriage ride back from a ball, her head resting against his shoulder, and he spent the entire journey frozen in place rather than risk waking her. Nathan knew he was in dangerous territory. He had seen enough of the world to understand that some distances could not be crossed, some barriers could not be broken. He was a commoner, a former soldier with nothing but his skills and his stubborn silence. She was orc nobility, the chief's beloved sister, a woman whose choice of partner would have political implications reaching far beyond personal happiness. But knowing did not stop his heart from lifting when he saw her, or his pulse from quickening when she smiled at him, or the fierce protectiveness that surged through him whenever anyone treated her as less than she was. The fourth ball of the season took place at Millhouse Grange, a sprawling estate known for its elaborate gardens. Nathan arrived early as usual, checking the grounds and entrances, cataloging faces and potential problems. The guest list had grown again, a testament to the success of the ongoing negotiations. Talk of a formal treaty signing circulated through the crowds, and the atmosphere carried a tentative optimism. Henna arrived with Garak and a small contingent of orc advisors, and Nathan felt the now familiar jolt of awareness when he saw her. She wore burgundy tonight, her hair loose except for two small braids that held it back from her face. When she spotted Nathan, her entire expression brightened, and she made her way to him immediately. "There you are," she said, as if they had not seen each other less than 2 days ago at the previous event. "I was afraid you might have reconsidered this assignment. It has been rather longer than you originally signed on for." "The pay is adequate," Nathan said, which was true but not the reason he kept accepting Garak's extensions of the contract. "Just adequate." Henna's eyes held a knowing gleam. "Here I thought you stayed for the scintillating company and excellent wine." "The wine is mediocre at best," she laughed, the sound making something warm unfurl in Nathan's chest. "Come on then, Guardian. Let us see what drama tonight brings." They moved into the ballroom together, falling into patterns that had become comfortable over the season. Nathan maintained his watchful presence while Henna navigated the social landscape, but now there were moments of private communication between them. Shared glances at particularly pompous speeches, subtle eye rolls when someone said something ridiculous, the brush of her hand against his arm when she wanted his attention. Others noticed. Nathan caught knowing looks from some of the regular attendees, and once overheard 2 orc warriors discussing whether the chief knew his sister had feelings for her guard. The conversation made Nathan's stomach clench with anxiety, but he could not bring himself to increase the distance between them. Midway through the evening, Duke Rothwell called for attention, announcing that the treaty negotiations had reached their final stages. A formal signing would take place at the season's last ball, scheduled for the following week at the Grand Summit Lodge. The ballroom erupted in applause and cheering, humans and orcs alike celebrating the approaching peace. Nathan watched Henna's face during the announcement and saw complex emotions play across her features. Pride in her brother's achievement, relief that peace seemed certain, but also something that looked like sadness. She caught him watching and offered a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Later, when they had stepped out for air on yet another terrace, Nathan finally asked about it. "The treaty is everything Garak has worked for," he said quietly. "Why do you look like someone died?" Henna leaned against the railing, her gaze on the darkened gardens. "Because when the treaty is signed, this season of balls ends. The constant gatherings, the diplomatic necessities that require my presence and therefore your protection." She paused, and her voice went softer. "You will have no reason to guard me anymore, Nathan." The words hit Nathan like a fist to the gut. He had been so focused on the moment-to-moment reality of seeing her, being near her, that he had not thought ahead to the end of the assignment. Once peace was formalized, Henna would return to her regular life in the mountain territories. Nathan would return to, what? Taking odd jobs, drifting from town to town, the same rootless existence he had lived since leaving the army. "I had not thought that far ahead," he admitted. "I have." Henna turned to face him, her expression vulnerable in a way he rarely saw. "I have thought about it entirely too much, actually. About what happens when you are no longer obligated to be near me." Nathan's heart hammered against his ribs. They were approaching territory they had both carefully avoided, the unspoken thing that had grown between them over weeks of careful proximity. He should retreat, should maintain the professional boundaries that were already dangerously eroded. Instead, he stepped closer. "Henna," he said, his voice rough, "you have to know that obligation stopped being the reason I stay near you weeks ago." Her breath caught. "Nathan, you asked me once what I see when I watch you. I see someone I have no business caring about the way I do. Someone so far above my station that even admitting this is probably a mistake, but I am tired of pretending this is just a job." "My station," Henna repeated, and something fierce entered her voice. "My station as the useful sister, the diplomatic tool, the bridge between cultures. Is that what you think I am? No, I think you are brilliant and brave and far too good for drunken nobles and political games." Nathan reached out, his hand hovering near her face but not quite touching. "I think you deserve someone who sees you as more than a means to an end. And I think I am the worst possible candidate for that role, but I cannot help wanting it anyway." Henna closed the distance between them, her hand coming up to cover his where it still hung in the air between them. "You see me," she said quietly. "Not the chief's sister, not the orc trying to fit into human society. Just me, Henna. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How precious?" "Henna, I fell in love with you somewhere between the first ball and now," she continued, the words spilling out like she had been holding them back too long. "With your quiet strength, your awful jokes that only I seem to hear, the way you watch me like I am the only person in the room. I tried not to. I told myself it was foolish and impossible and would only end in heartbreak, but I fell anyway." Nathan felt like someone had knocked the air from his lungs. She loved him. This remarkable woman loved him, and the joy that realization brought clashed immediately with the cold reality of their circumstances. "Your brother is going to be a problem," Henna finished. "Along with the treaty implications and the political complications and every practical concern you are thinking of right now. I know. But I needed you to know how I feel before this season ends and we both retreat into pretending nothing happened." Nathan looked at her, at the vulnerability and determination in her face, and made a choice that was probably going to cost him everything. He cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumbs brushing the elegant line of her jaw, careful of her small tusks. "I love you," he said, the words emerging rough and certain. "I have spent weeks trying not to and failed completely. I love your strength and your grace and the way you make everyone around you better just by being present. I love how you laugh and how you think, and how you have never once made me feel less than I am." He paused, his throat tight. "And I have no idea how we make this work, but I want to try." Henna's eyes gleamed with tears. "That may be the longest speech I have ever heard you make. Do not get used to it." She laughed, watery but genuine, and then she was kissing him, her arms coming up around his neck. Nathan pulled her close, pouring weeks of careful restraint and denied feeling into the kiss. She tasted like wine and hope, and when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan felt like the world had shifted on its axis. "We are going to have to tell Garak," Henna said eventually, still pressed against Nathan's chest. "He is going to kill me." "Probably not. He likes you." She pulled back enough to look at Nathan's face, her expression turning serious. "But there will be complications. Questions about whether you are using me to gain status or whether I am betraying my people for a human. Are those things you worry about?" "No, but others will." "We need to be prepared for that." Nathan nodded, already running through scenarios and problems. His tactical mind, so useful for guarding Henna through dangerous social situations, now turned to the challenge of protecting what they had found together. "The final ball," he said slowly. "If the treaty gets signed, if peace is formalized, we wait until after that. Then we approach Garak together, make our case. You think he will listen? I think he loves you. and I think he wants you happy more than he wants you politically useful." Nathan tucked a strand of hair behind her pointed ear. "But we need to be careful until then. If anyone suspects and decides to cause trouble before the treaty is signed, they could sabotage everything my brother has worked for." Henna's expression tightened with resolve. "We wait, we are careful, and then we fight for this." "Together," Nathan agreed. They stayed on the terrace a while longer, stealing moments of closeness before returning to the performance required of them. When they stepped back into the ballroom, Nathan resumed his watchful position, and Henna returned to her diplomatic work. But something fundamental had changed. They had named what existed between them, had claimed it despite the obstacles, and that knowledge burned bright in Nathan's chest like a coal fire on a winter night. The remaining week before the final ball passed in a strange tension. Nathan continued his role as Henna's guard, but now he was hyper-aware of every moment they spent together. Every glance and brief touch charged with new meaning. They stole private conversations when they could, planning and dreaming and occasionally giving in to the fierce need to simply be close to each other. But Nathan's trained instincts were screaming warnings. Something felt wrong at the gatherings, a current of tension beneath the celebratory atmosphere. He noticed people watching Henna with more than casual interest, caught fragments of conversations that cut off when he approached. His old scout training kicked in, and he started paying closer attention to patterns. Who attended which events, who spoke to whom, which faces appeared repeatedly in Henna's vicinity. 3 days before the final ball, Nathan identified the problem. A group of 5 men, all human, all from wealthy families with holdings near the border. They had attended every ball of the season but had never participated in the social aspects, never sought conversation with the orc representatives. Instead, they watched and whispered and radiated a hostility that Nathan recognized from his army days. He brought his concerns to Garak quietly, finding the chief reviewing treaty documents in a borrowed office at the estate where they were currently staying. "The tall one with the scar," Nathan said, describing the group's apparent leader. "He has been watching your sister with intent that has nothing to do with social interest." Garak's expression darkened. "You think someone means to harm Henna?" "I think someone means to disrupt the treaty, and harming Henna would accomplish that goal." Nathan kept his voice level despite the cold fury coiling in his gut. "If something happened to her at the final ball, if violence broke out at the treaty signing, it would shatter the peace before it even begins." Garak stood, his massive frame somehow growing larger with anger. "What do you need? More guards, but subtle ones. And I want to know everything about those 5 men, who they are connected to, what they stand to lose from peace." Nathan paused, weighing his next words. "And I want your permission to keep Henna close at the final ball, closer than I have been. I will not let anything happen to her." Something in Garak's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing as he studied Nathan. "You care about my sister." It was not a question, and Nathan saw no point in denying it. "Yes. How much?" "Enough that I will die before I let anyone hurt her," Nathan said flatly. "But also enough that I am asking your permission rather than simply acting. Henna deserves that respect, and so do you." Garak was silent for a long moment, his gaze pinning Nathan in place with uncomfortable intensity. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "Good. I was beginning to wonder if you were ever going to admit it. My sister has been mooning over you for weeks." Nathan felt heat climb his neck. "Chief, after the treaty is signed, you and I are going to have a long conversation about your intentions," Garak interrupted. "But right now, I need you focused on keeping her safe. Find out about these men. I will arrange for additional security, and I will make sure Henna understands the potential danger." His expression went hard, and Nathan, If anyone tries to harm my sister, you have my permission to respond with whatever force you deem necessary." Nathan nodded, the cold fury in his gut settling into focused purpose. "Yes, Chief." He spent the next 2 days digging into the backgrounds of the 5 men, calling in favors from old army contacts and bribing servants for information. The picture that emerged was damning. All 5 came from families who had profited from the border conflicts, either through war contracts or by acquiring abandoned land cheap. Peace meant the end of their profits and potentially investigations into how they had acquired their wealth. They had obvious motivation to sabotage the treaty, and harming a key member of the orc delegation would be an effective method. The night before the final ball, Nathan found Henna in the library of the Summit Lodge, surrounded by books and looking exhausted. She brightened when she saw him, then frowned at his expression. Something is wrong. Potentially. Nathan closed the library door and moved to where she sat, crouching beside her chair so they were at eye level. "I need you to listen carefully. Tomorrow night, there are men who may try to hurt you to prevent the treaty signing." Henna's eyes widened, fear flickering across her face before determination replaced it. "You are certain enough that your brother has arranged extra security, but I need you to promise me something." Nathan took her hands, gripping them firmly. "Tomorrow night you stay where I can see you. If I tell you to move, you move. If I tell you to run, you run. No arguments, no diplomatic considerations, just immediate obedience. Please, Henna. You are frightening me." "Good. I need you frightened enough to be careful." He lifted one of her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I will not let anything happen to you, but I need you to trust me completely." "I do trust you." Henna leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "I trust you more than anyone except my brother. Keep me safe, Nathan. And then, after all this is over, we tell Garak everything and we figure out how to make this work." "I promise," Nathan said, and sealed it with a kiss that tasted like fear and hope tangled together. The Grand Summit Lodge lived up to its name, a massive structure of stone and timber perched on a mountainside with views that stretched for miles. The ballroom could have held 3 of the previous venues, and the guest list had swelled to include anyone with even tangential connection to the treaty negotiations. This was the culmination of the season, the moment when months of careful diplomacy would be formalized into lasting peace. Nathan arrived hours early, inspecting every entrance and exit, positioning the additional guards Garak had hired at strategic points. He wore his best clothes but had ensured he could move freely in them, and his knife sat in its usual position at his belt, an old habit from his army days that had become relevant again. When Henna arrived, Nathan felt his breath catch despite the circumstances. She wore white, a deliberate choice that would stand out among the darker formal where most guests favored. Her hair had been woven with silver threads that caught the light, and she looked like something from a legend, beautiful and ethereal and entirely too vulnerable. "I know what you are thinking," she said quietly as she approached, "that I am too visible, too obvious a target." "Yes," Nathan admitted. "Good, that is the point." Her voice was steady but her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her gloves. "If someone wants to disrupt this treaty by harming me, let them see me. Let them try. Because they will have to go through you first, and I do not think that will end well for them." Nathan wanted to argue, wanted to insist she stay hidden and safe, but he recognized the determination in her eyes. Henna had spent the entire season being her brother's bridge between cultures, putting herself forward as a symbol of possibility. She would not hide now, even in the face of real danger. "Stay close to me," he said instead. "Please, always." The ballroom filled quickly as sunset approached. hundreds of guests mingling beneath elaborate chandeliers. Nathan kept Henna in his line of sight constantly. His awareness expanded to include every person in the room, every movement, every potential threat. The 5 men he had identified were present, scattered through the crowd but maintaining eye contact with each other. Watching. Waiting. Garak and Duke Rothwell took the stage as full darkness fell outside, calling the assembly to order. The treaty signing would take place at midnight, a symbolic gesture marking the start of a new era. Until then, the evening would proceed as the previous balls had, with music and dancing and careful celebration. Nathan watched the 5 men watch Henna, saw them communicating through subtle gestures. They were planning something, waiting for an opportunity. He shifted his position to block their clearest sightline to her and caught one of them scowling. Good. Let them know she was protected. The evening crawled forward with agonizing slowness. Henna played her role perfectly, circulating through the crowd, speaking with enthusiasm about the coming peace. But she stayed within Nathan's reach, never straying far, and he saw the tension in her shoulders despite her smiling face. An hour before midnight, one of the 5 men approached Henna while she spoke with an orc elder about trade routes. Nathan tensed, his hand drifting toward his knife, but the man simply offered a shallow bow. "Miss Blackthorn, I wonder if you might settle a debate. My associates and I have been discussing the new border arrangements, and we are curious about the orc perspective on the disputed territories near Eagle Ridge." It was a trap, obvious to Nathan if not to Henna. She glanced at him and he gave the slightest shake of his head. Her expression cooled. "I am certain those details are available in the treaty documentation," she said politely. "Perhaps you should direct your questions to the negotiators rather than interrupting private conversations." The man's pleasant facade slipped, irritation flashing across his face. "Of course. Though I wonder if you will be so dismissive when you see how little your beloved peace actually matters to people who understand power." He turned and walked away before Nathan could respond, rejoining his 4 companions near the terrace doors. They conversed briefly, then 3 of them slipped outside while 2 remained in the ballroom watching. "Nathan," Henna said quietly, her voice tight with fear. "I know." Nathan caught the eye of one of the extra guards and gestured toward the terrace. Then he leaned close to Henna, his lips near her ear. "We are going to move toward your brother, slowly and naturally. Smile like I just said something charming." Henna managed a laugh that sounded almost genuine. They began working through the crowd, Nathan keeping his body between Henna and the 2 men who remained in the ballroom. He saw them notice, saw them signal toward the terrace, and his instincts screamed warnings. They were 20 feet from Garak when shouting erupted from outside. Nathan heard glass breaking, screams, and then someone yelling about fire. The ballroom erupted into chaos as guests surged toward the exits, and Nathan grabbed Henna's arm, pulling her close against his chest. "Hold on to me," he ordered, and began forcing his way toward the stage where Garak stood, trying to restore order. The crowd pressed from all sides, panicking guests shoving and pushing. Nathan caught a flash of movement to his left, and turned just in time to see one of the 2 men from the ballroom lunging toward Henna with something gleaming in his hand. Nathan moved on pure instinct, shoving Henna behind him and catching the man's wrist as the blade descended. They grappled, the crowd around them screaming and scattering. Nathan twisted hard and the man yelped, the knife clattering to the floor. Nathan drove his elbow into the man's face and felt cartilage crunch, then kicked his legs out from under him. "Nathan." Henna's warning came just in time for Nathan to dodge the second man's attack, a clumsy swing that telegraphed itself. Nathan caught the arm, used the man's momentum against him, and slammed him face first into the floor. The crowd had cleared a space around them now, and Nathan heard Garak bellowing orders, saw orc warriors and the hired guards converging. But his attention fixed on Henna, checking her frantically for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "No, no, I am fine." "You?" Her hands patted his chest, his arms searching for wounds. "I am fine." Nathan pulled her close, his heart hammering. The two attackers were being restrained by guards, and through the terrace doors Nathan could see smoke rising, the source of the fire that had sparked the panic. The third element of the trap, designed to create chaos. Garak reached them, his face dark with fury. "What happened?" "They tried to stab Henna in the confusion," Nathan said flatly. "I stopped them." "You saved me," Henna corrected, her voice shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. Again. The rest of the night blurred together in a series of interrogations and explanations. The fire had been set deliberately, designed to create panic and cover for the assassination attempt. The 5 men had coordinated their attack, believing that killing Henna would either prevent the treaty signing or spark immediate retaliation that would shatter the fragile peace. They had not counted on Nathan's vigilance or the additional security measures Garak had implemented. Duke Rothwell, once the situation was explained, looked simultaneously furious and exhausted. "This is precisely why we need the treaty. This cycle of violence and sabotage serves no one." "It serves those who profit from conflict," Garak rumbled, "but they have failed. The treaty will be signed tonight as planned, and these men will face justice from both our peoples." As guards led the 5 conspirators away, and servants worked to clear smoke and repair damage, Nathan finally allowed himself to breathe. Henna had not left his side, her hand clasped firmly in his, and he saw Garak watching them with an unreadable expression. The treaty signing took place just after midnight, delayed but not defeated. Garak and Duke Rothwell affixed their signatures to the document while the assembled witnesses applauded, the sound carrying a weight of relief and hard-won hope. Peace, formal and binding, had been achieved. Afterward, as guests slowly departed and the summit lodge settled into quiet, Garak found Nathan and Henna standing together on a terrace overlooking the mountains. The fire damage had been contained to one corner of the grounds, and the night air smelled of smoke and pine. "We need to talk," Garak said, his tone giving nothing away. Nathan straightened, Henna's hand still in his. "Yes, Chief, you love my sister." It was the same lack of question as before, and Nathan gave the same answer. "Yes. And you, sister?" Garak turned his attention to Henna. "How do you feel about your guard?" "I love him," Henna said clearly. "And before you cite all the political complications and social barriers and reasonable objections, I will save you the effort. I know. I do not care. Nathan has guarded my life and won my heart, and I will not give him up because it is inconvenient." Garak was quiet for a long moment, his massive frame silhouetted against the mountains. Then, shockingly, he laughed. "You think I object?" "Henna, I sent you with him hoping something like this would happen." Nathan felt his understanding of the situation shift entirely. "What? You think I hired a young, honorable, capable human to guard my sister for an entire season without considering this outcome?" Garak shook his head, still chuckling. "I have watched you find reasons not to marry every orc warrior I introduced you to, sister. I thought perhaps the problem was not the men but the species." Nathan seemed like an excellent test of that theory. Henna looked torn between outrage and laughter. "You manipulated us. I gave you an opportunity. What you did with it was your own choice." Garak's expression turned serious. "But I will ask you both, is this real? Are you certain you want to build a life together with all the complications that will bring?" "Yes." Nathan and Henna said simultaneously. Nathan continued alone. I have nothing to offer her but myself, Chief. No wealth, no status, no political advantage. But I swear to you that I will spend the rest of my life proving worthy of her trust. I will guard her, cherish her, stand beside her through whatever complications come. If you allow it. If I allow it, Garak repeated. As if I could stop either of you once you had made up your minds. He moved closer, placing one massive hand on Nathan's shoulder and the other on Henna's. You have my blessing, both of you. The treaty is signed, peace is achieved, and my sister deserves to choose her own happiness for once. Henna made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and launched herself at her brother, hugging him fiercely. Garak returned the embrace, and Nathan saw genuine emotion in the chief's eyes. Thank you, Henna whispered. Thank you, brother. Just be happy, Garak said. And Nathan, if you ever give me reason to regret this decision, I will feed you to wolves. Understood, Chief, Nathan said, meaning it absolutely. Garak left them on the terrace, citing exhaustion and paperwork. Henna turned to Nathan, her face radiant with joy and tears tracking through her makeup. We did it, she said wonderingly. We actually did it. Nathan pulled her close, kissing her with the desperate relief of someone who had feared losing everything. You were right, he murmured against her lips, about fighting for this, about it being worth the complications. We will have more complications ahead, Henna warned. People will talk, will question, will make our relationship more difficult than it needs to be. Let them talk. I have faced worse than gossip. So have I. She smiled up at him, her amber eyes bright. Besides, I think we have proven we make a rather effective team. The stoic guard and the chief's sister against the world. That sounds like the beginning of a terrible ballad. Oh, it absolutely will be. Give it a month and some drunk bard will be singing about us in taverns across the territory. Nathan groaned, but he was smiling. They stood together as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, the smoke from the fire dissipating into morning mist. The season of balls had ended, the treaty was signed, and before them stretched the complicated, beautiful reality of the life they would build together. The following weeks brought exactly the complications Henna had predicted. News of their relationship spread quickly through both human and orc communities, sparking reactions that ranged from supportive to hostile. Some celebrated the union as a symbol of the new peace, while others saw it as a betrayal of cultural identity. Nathan found himself the subject of speculation and rumor, accused by turns of social climbing, fortune hunting, or simply poor judgment. He ignored it all with the same quiet steadiness that had served him through 6 years of war. Henna faced her own share of criticism, particularly from orc traditionalists who felt she had rejected her heritage. But with Garak's public support and her own unwavering determination, she weathered the storm. They were married in early autumn, in a ceremony that blended human and orc traditions in ways that pleased no purists but satisfied the couple themselves. Garak officiated, his voice carrying across the gathered witnesses as he spoke of bridges between peoples and the courage required to choose love over convenience. Nathan had never imagined himself married, had never dared to want the kind of happiness he saw in Henna's eyes as she took his hand. When he spoke his vows, promising to stand beside her through whatever came, his voice remained steady even as emotion threatened to choke him. I cannot promise wealth or status, he said, the words carrying to the assembled guests. I cannot promise an easy life or freedom from struggle. But I can promise that I will guard your heart as carefully as I guarded your life. I will see you, Henna Blackthorn, not as symbol or tool or political asset, but as the remarkable woman you are. Every day for the rest of my days. Henna's own vows were equally simple and equally profound, speaking of finding home in an unexpected place, of discovering that strength came in many forms, and of choosing to build a life rather than simply fulfill a role. When they kissed as husband and wife, the cheering from supporters drowned out any lingering disapproval. They settled in a small holding on the border between human and orc territories, a house that sat in literal and figurative middle ground. Nathan learned orcish customs from Henna and taught her the practical skills of farming and homesteading. They built a life that belonged entirely to them, shaped by their choices rather than others' expectations. Nathan found work as a guide and negotiator, his unique position allowing him to facilitate communications between humans and orcs, still finding their way toward genuine peace. Henna established a school teaching both people's children together, the first of its kind in the territories. Their days were full of work and purpose, but also of quiet evenings on their porch, watching the sun set over land that belonged to neither culture exclusively, but instead to the peace they had helped achieve. The first real test of their marriage came in the second spring, when Henna discovered she was pregnant. The pregnancy itself progressed normally, but the implications sparked fresh rounds of speculation and concern. What would a half-human, half-orc child be like? Which culture would they belong to? The questions carried an ugly edge, as if their child was an experiment rather than a person. Nathan found Henna crying in their garden one afternoon, her hands resting protectively over her belly. He sat beside her in the dirt, pulling her against his chest. "What are we bringing a child into?" she asked brokenly. "What if they face worse prejudice than either of us ever did? What if they do not fit anywhere?" "Then they will be like their mother," Nathan said quietly. "Remarkable and strong and perfectly capable of making their own place in the world. And they will have parents who understand what it feels like to be different, who will teach them that being unique is not a weakness. You make it sound simple. It will not be simple, but we have never chosen simple, have we?" He kissed the top of her head. "We chose each other, despite everything. We will choose our child just as fiercely." Their daughter was born in late autumn, perfect and healthy and green-skinned like her mother. They named her Reyna after Nathan's grandmother, and because the name meant joy in the orcish tongue. She had Henna's pointed ears and amber eyes, Nathan's nose and chin, and tiny tusks that would grow larger as she aged. From the moment Nathan held her, his hands seeming impossibly large around her small body, he was completely lost to her. Fatherhood suited him in ways he had not anticipated. The same focused attention he had brought to guarding Henna now turned to protecting and nurturing their daughter. He spoke to Reyna constantly in both human common tongue and orcish, wanting her to grow up comfortable in both languages. He built furniture for her room with his own hands, each piece carefully crafted and sturdy. Henna watched him with their daughter and fell in love all over again. "You are a natural at this," she told him one evening, watching Nathan walk their fussing baby around the house, his deep voice rumbling a lullaby. "I am terrified every moment of every day," Nathan admitted, "but she is worth the fear." Reyna grew up surrounded by both cultures, a bridge between peoples in her very existence. She looked like her mother but moved like her father, decisive and sure-footed. By age 3, she was speaking fluent Orcish and Common, correcting adults when they mixed up words from either language. She attended her mother's school and became its most enthusiastic ambassador, making friends from both human and orc children with the effortless ease of someone who had never been taught to see differences as barriers. Nathan watched his daughter navigate the world with a pride that sometimes threatened to overwhelm him. She was proof that the peace he and Henna had helped protect was not merely political but personal, not just possible but flourishing. On Raina's 4th birthday, as friends from across the territories gathered to celebrate, Nathan found a moment alone with Henna on their porch. She leaned against him, comfortable and content, watching their daughter play with her friends in the yard. "Did you ever imagine this?" Henna asked. "When you first agreed to guard me through that season of balls," Nathan considered the question seriously. "No, I imagined a job, a paycheck, and then returning to whatever came next. I did not imagine finding home." "Home," Henna repeated softly. "Yes, that is exactly what this is, what you are." She turned to look up at him, her eyes bright. "Do you remember what you said in your vows? That you would guard my heart as carefully as you guarded my life?" "I remember every word." "You guarded it too well, Nathan Yorke. You stole it completely, and I have never wanted it back." Nathan kissed her, slow and deep, tasting 5 years of marriage and partnership and love that had only deepened with time. When they broke apart, Raina was watching them from the yard with the particular expression children get when they find their parents embarrassing. "Are you being mushy again?" she called, her small tusks visible as she grinned. "Extremely mushy," Henna confirmed. "Come here, birthday girl, and join the mushiness." Raina ran to them and Nathan caught her, swinging her up onto his shoulders. She shrieked with laughter, her small hands gripping his hair for balance. Henna leaned against both of them, and Nathan felt the complete rightness of the moment, the perfect circle of the family they had built together. The treaty balls seemed like a lifetime ago, that season of careful politics and growing feelings. But they had led to this: a home on the border, a daughter who embodied peace, and a marriage built on mutual respect and genuine love. Nathan had been hired to guard Henna through a dangerous season, and in the end, he had guarded her heart right into his own keeping. As far as assignments went, it was the best one he had ever accepted. The years continued to unfold in a pattern of contentment broken by the usual challenges of life. Nathan's work as a guide and negotiator expanded as trade between human and orc territories increased. He became known for his fair dealing and his ability to see both sides of disputes, a reputation that brought steady income and regular travel. Henna's school grew from a single room to a proper building, with multiple teachers and students from increasingly distant settlements. They had 2 more children: Oren when Raina was 5, a boy with his father's serious demeanor and his mother's quick intelligence, and Finn 3 years after that, a cheerful child who seemed to find joy in everything. Both boys had their mother's green skin and small tusks, their father's strong build and quiet observation skills. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family, rooms added as needed, each addition reflecting the hybrid culture they had created. The children grew up hearing stories of how their parents met, of treaty balls and assassination attempts, of a stoic guard and a chief sister who had fallen in love despite everything. Raina in particular loved these stories, insisting on hearing them over and over, as if she could never quite believe her ordinary parents had lived something so dramatic. "Tell the part about when Papa stopped the bad men," she would demand, and Nathan would sigh but comply, editing the violence for young ears but keeping the essential truth: that protecting people you loved sometimes meant standing between them and danger. When Raina was 10, old enough to understand complexity, she asked Nathan a question that caught him off guard. They were working together in the garden, harvesting late summer vegetables, when she straightened from the tomato plants with dirt on her hands and curiosity in her amber eyes. "Papa, were you afraid? When you knew people wanted to hurt Mama?" Nathan considered his answer carefully. "Yes, more afraid than I had been in war, because losing her would have meant losing everything that mattered, but you protected her anyway." "That is what you do when you love someone, Raina. The fear does not go away, but it becomes less important than keeping them safe." Raina nodded, processing this. Then, I want to be like that, strong enough to protect people even when I am scared. You already are, Nathan told her, meaning it completely. He had watched his daughter stand up to children who teased others for being different, had seen her include lonely kids in games, had witnessed her fierce loyalty to her brothers. You have your mother's strength and her compassion. Those will take you far. As the children grew, Nathan found himself thinking often about the strange path his life had taken. He had been a soldier trained for violence, a scout who specialized in watching and reporting. That man would never have imagined becoming a husband and father, a homesteader and negotiator, someone whose greatest pride was his family rather than his military achievements. But Henna had seen something in that silent scout, something Nathan himself had not known was there, the capacity for tenderness, for patience, for building rather than destroying. She had drawn it out of him through her own example, through trust and love and the everyday work of partnership. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they returned to the Grand Summit Lodge where the final treaty ball had taken place. The lodge now hosted regular gatherings celebrating the ongoing peace, and this particular event marked a decade since the treaty signing. Nathan and Henna attended without children for the first time in years, having left Raina in charge of her brothers with Garak nearby in case of emergency. The ballroom held memories in every corner. Nathan stood near the spot where he had fought off Henna's attackers, where blood had spilled and panic had reigned. Now it glittered with celebration, filled with people who had never known the fear and hatred that had preceded peace. Young people, both human and orc, danced together without the careful political calculation that had marked that first season. Some were even mixed couples, following the path Nathan and Henna had helped to normalize. "Look what we helped make possible," Henna said softly, her hand in his as they watched the dancers. "Not just us, of course, my brother Duke Rothwell, all the people who chose peace. But we were part of it, Nathan, we mattered." "You mattered," Nathan corrected. "I just guarded you." "You did so much more than that." Henna turned to face him fully, her expression fierce. "You showed people that love could cross any divide. You proved that strength came in many forms, that a guard could become a husband and father, that an orc woman could choose her own path. We built something real together and it rippled outward." Nathan pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "I would do it all again. Every moment, every choice, every complication. They all led here to this life with you, even the assassination attempt. Well, maybe I would skip that part, but everything else." They danced together as they had that first night when everything was new and frightening and full of possibility. Nathan was still not a graceful dancer, but Henna had never seemed to mind, and now they moved together with the ease of long practice and deep familiarity. Around them, the world continued its celebration, but Nathan was aware only of his wife in his arms, the weight of her hand in his, the way she fit perfectly against him. "Guard my heart a little longer," Henna murmured against his chest. "Just a few more decades." "I plan to guard it until I am too old to stand," Nathan promised. "And then I will guard it sitting down." Henna laughed, and the sound carried Nathan back to that first ball, to the moment he had realized this assignment was going to change everything. He had been right to be wary, right to recognize the danger. But he had been wrong about one thing. He had thought falling in love with Henna was a complication, a problem to be managed and endured. In truth, loving her had been the simplest, truest thing he had ever done. Everything else had been complicated. The love itself was pure clarity, a North Star that had guided him from lonely soldier to devoted husband and father. They danced until the music ended, and then they stayed on the floor as the next song began, unwilling to let go of the moment or each other. Around them, Peace bloomed and flourished, and at the center of it all, a former guard and the chief's sister held each other close and marveled at the life they had built from trust and choice and stubborn, complicated love. The final ball had been the end of one season and the beginning of everything else. Nathan had guarded Henna through danger and politics and social upheaval. But in the end, the greatest thing he had protected was not her life but their chance at happiness, that fragile possibility that two people from different worlds might find home in each other. He had guarded her heart, yes, but she had claimed his just as thoroughly, and that mutual claiming had made them both richer than they could have ever been alone. As the night wound down and they prepared to return home to their children and their life on the border, Nathan realized that he had finally found what he had been searching for since leaving the army: purpose, belonging, and the kind of peace that came not from treaties but from love freely given and faithfully kept. Garak found them before they departed, his massive frame somehow fitting in the lodge's doorway despite the improbability. "Going home already? We have 3 children who are probably wreaking havoc on your house," Henna pointed out. "Reyna is responsible, but the boys are inventive." "They are fine. Your daughter has them building something in the garden. I am afraid to ask what." Garak's expression turned serious. "I wanted to thank you both. This peace we celebrate tonight, it exists because people like you made it real in your daily lives. A treaty is just words on paper until individuals choose to live it. We just fell in love," Henna protested. "We were not trying to make grand statements about peace. That is precisely why it mattered. You chose each other for personal reasons, not political ones. And in doing so, you showed everyone else that it was possible." Garak gripped Nathan's shoulder in his familiar fashion, though the gesture had lost its testing quality and become purely affectionate over the years. "You have been good for my sister, Nathan Yorke. And good for your children, and good for this peace we all work to achieve. I could not have asked for a better brother." Nathan felt his throat tighten. "Thank you, Chief, for everything, for trusting me with Henna, for supporting us, for being there for our family." "You make it sound like charity. You earned every bit of that trust." Garak released Nathan and pulled Henna into a hug that lifted her off her feet. "Go home to your children, and visit more often. I am getting old, and I would like to spend time with my nieces and nephews while I can still keep up with them." They left the lodge as the celebration continued behind them, walking to their wagon under stars that glittered like scattered diamonds. The night air smelled of pine and smoke from the lodge's many chimneys, and autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet. "You ever miss it?" Henna asked as Nathan helped her into the wagon. "The simplicity of just being a guard, before you had a wife and 3 children and a house that always needs repairs." Nathan settled beside her and picked up the reins, considering the question as the horse started the journey home. "No. I miss nothing about that life except the parts that led me to you. The rest was just existing. This is living." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon rocking gently on the uneven road. Above them, the moon rose full and bright, illuminating the path ahead. In the distance, lights from scattered homesteads dotted the darkness, each one representing another family building their life in this new era of peace. "The children will want to hear about the ball tomorrow," Henna said eventually. "Reyna especially. She loves hearing about the grand events. Then we will tell her about the dancing and the fancy clothes, and how her uncle got sentimental at the end. She will like that. She worries that Garak is lonely, with just warriors and advisors for company." "Perhaps we should find him a wife," Nathan suggested, and immediately regretted it at Henna's speculative look. "Now that is an interesting idea. If I remember correctly, there is an orc ambassador to the Southern Territories, very accomplished, Very intelligent. I was joking, Henna. I am not. My brother deserves happiness too, and he did play matchmaker for us in his own way. Turnabout seems fair. Nathan groaned but smiled, imagining Garak's reaction to his sister's interference in his personal life. The chief would probably appreciate the irony even as he resisted the manipulation. Their family had a talent for loving each other through sheer, stubborn determination. They reached home near midnight, finding the house lit and waiting. True to Garak's word, the children were fine, if tired from their adventure building what appeared to be an elaborate fort in the garden. Rhaena met them at the door with a detailed report of the evening, while Orin and Finn clung sleepily to Nathan's legs. "Did you dance, Papa?" Rhaena asked as Nathan carried both boys toward their bedroom. "Did Mama wear something beautiful? Was there cake?" "Yes, yes, and yes," Nathan confirmed. "Now bed for all of you, and we will tell you everything tomorrow." He tucked the boys in, accepting sleepy kisses and murmured goodnights, then found Rhaena in her room, supposedly preparing for bed but actually sitting at her window watching the night sky. She looked so much like her mother in profile that Nathan felt his chest tighten with love and pride. "What are you thinking about?" he asked from the doorway. "How you and Mama met, how you fell in love even though it was complicated." She turned to look at him, her amber eyes serious. "Do you think I will find someone like that someday? Someone who sees me and not just what I represent?" "I think you are 10 and should not be worrying about such things yet," Nathan said, moving to sit on the edge of her bed. "But yes, Rhaena, when you are older, when you are ready, you will find someone who sees exactly who you are, and they will be very lucky because you are remarkable." "You have to say that. You are my papa." "I say it because it is true. Ask your mother if you do not believe me. She will list all your remarkable qualities at length." Rhaena smiled, some of her seriousness fading. "I hope I find what you and Mama have." "You always look at her like she is the most important person in the world." "She is," Nathan said simply. "Along with you and your brothers, the four of you are everything that matters." He kissed Rhaena's forehead and left her to sleep, finding Henna in their own room, already changed for bed and sitting by the window much as their daughter had been. She looked up as he entered, and her smile held the same warmth and love it had carried for 10 years. The children settled. She asked, eventually. Rhaena wanted reassurance that she will find love someday. Orin wanted another drink. Finn wanted his stuffed bear, which was under his bed where it always is. The normal chaos then. Henna held out her hand and Nathan took it, letting her pull him down beside her. They sat together in the quiet room, looking out at the land they had claimed and tamed together. "Thank you," Henna said after a while. "For what?" "For seeing me all those years ago. For guarding me through that season and every day since. For building this life with me even when it was hard." She turned to face him, her expression vulnerable. "For loving me well, Nathan. You have loved me so well." Nathan cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing along her jaw the way he had done 1,000 times before. "It has been the easiest thing I have ever done. You make it easy to love you." "Liar. I am stubborn and opinionated and I track mud through the house. And I am silent and withdrawn and I wake up too early. We are imperfect together and it is perfect." They kissed, sweet and familiar, the kiss of long partnership rather than new passion but no less meaningful for it. When they finally settled into bed, Henna curled against Nathan's side with her head on his chest, and Nathan wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "Tell me something," Henna murmured into the darkness. "When you first agreed to guard me, what did you think would happen?" "I thought I would stand in corners looking threatening, collect my pay, and move on to the next job. I had no idea that Garak's sister would be someone who would change everything. That makes 2 of us. I thought you would be some gruff soldier who treated me like an assignment and nothing more." She traced idle patterns on his chest. "I am glad we were both wrong." "So am I," Nathan said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. They fell asleep like that, tangled together in their bed, in their house, surrounded by the family they had built and the peace they had helped create. Outside, the world continued its slow turn toward morning, and in the darkness, the future waited with all its possibilities and challenges. But Nathan no longer worried about what might come. He had learned that some things were worth any complication, any struggle, any fear. Love was one of those things. Family was another. And the life he had built with Henna encompassed both, a richness he had never imagined possible during those lonely years after the war. The guard who had been hired to protect a chief's sister through a season of political balls had found something far more valuable than gold in that assignment. He had found home, purpose, and a love that had only deepened with time and trial. And if he had guarded Henna's heart a bit too well, if he had claimed it completely and kept it safe through every storm, well, she had done exactly the same to his, and that mutual guardianship had proven the foundation for everything good in his life. As dawn broke over their small holding on the border between two peoples, light spilled through the window and across the sleeping couple. In the children's rooms, 3 lives they had created together began to stir, ready for another day of growth and discovery. The treaty balls were a decade past, but their legacy lived on in this family, this home, this quiet proof that love could indeed bridge any divide when 2 people were brave enough to reach across it. Nathan Yorke had been hired to guard Henna Blackthorn, and he had fulfilled that assignment beyond anyone's expectations, protecting not just her life but her heart. And in doing so, finding that his own heart had been guarded and cherished in return. It was, he thought as he woke to find Henna watching him with sleepy affection, the best possible outcome for what had started as a simple job. The guard and the chief's sister, the soldier and the diplomat, the 2 people who should never have worked, but somehow created something beautiful together. They had built a bridge not just between their peoples but between 2 lonely souls, and that bridge had become the foundation for everything that mattered. "Good morning," Henna whispered, her fingers brushing through his hair. "Good morning," Nathan replied, pulling her closer for one more quiet moment before the day and their children claimed them. Outside, the world waited with all its complexities and joys, its struggles and triumphs. But here, in this room, in this bed, in this embrace, everything was simple. 2 people who loved each other, who had chosen each other, who would continue choosing each other through whatever came next. The season of balls had ended long ago, but the dance continued, and Nathan intended to keep dancing with Henna for the rest of his days. He had guarded her heart too well to ever let it go, and she had claimed his just as completely, and that mutual claiming was the truest treaty of all, one written not in ink on paper, but in the daily acts of love, respect, and partnership that made up their life together.